To Deirdre. That's the start.
Oh, okay.
Greetings, everybody. I would like to start by introducing our co-chair of marketing, Deirdre Donchen, and she is going to introduce you to what's going to be happening today.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to be having the first of 5 presentations on the PAAC ADHD Coaching Essentials, and we are starting with the ADHD Lens. We have a couple of guidelines for today's meeting. We're going to keep everybody muted so that everybody has a chance to read and listen to what's going on. We are using the protocol of opening and closing word that Catherine will review at the beginning and at the end. And we are asking that if you are a PAAC member to email us at info@coaches.org, which I've put into the chat. I'll explain where that is in a second. And do that within 4 hours. So looking for the opening and closing word within 24 hours of this presentation in order for you to acquire a PAAC continuing education. And if you're not familiar with Google Meets, if you look down at the bottom part of your screen off to the right, there is a little box that looks like a dialog box. That is the chat. If you click that, that is where we are asking you to put your questions. I'm going to do my best to make sure all the topics of the questions get answered when we have our Q&A. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine now.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Catherine Bray, and I am the co-president of PAAC, the Professional Association for ADHD Coaches. And I want to again welcome you, as Deirdre did, to this presentation, the first of 5. And as she said, you will, if you need a PAAC CEU, attending this live presentation does qualify you for a CEU. And we will present the opening word and the closing word. And the opening word for today is essentials. ESSENTIALS, essentials. Because the 5 essentials are the foundation of PAAC, what you must have or need to have a fabulous coaching conversation with an ADHD client. We have a very special, you know what else I was going to ask you? If you have a chance, put where you're from in the chat. We would love to see from all over the world who has come to be with us today, because PAAC is the international organization that credentials ADHD coaches. And we have an incredibly special guest with us today. Really, I have a bio here, but I can't say enough personally how much David Giwerc has meant to the ADHD community. David is actually one of the founding members of PAAC, so he's been with us from the very beginning. And let me tell you a little bit about David Giwerc. David is a master certified ADHD coach with PAAC and an MCC with ICF. He is also the founder and president of the ADD Coach Academy, the first and largest comprehensive ADHD coach training program fully accredited by the ICF and PAAC, the governing bodies of the life coaching and ADHD coaching professions. David has served on many boards over the years. As past president of ADA, he was instrumental in the formation of the U.S. Senate resolution that declared September 7th, 2004 to be National ADHD Awareness Day. And eventually that resolution culminated in the creation of ADHD Awareness Month, a whole month where the leading nonprofit ADHD organizations are devoted to sharing reliable information about ADHD with the public based on current neuroscience and peer-reviewed research. Currently, David serves on the professional advisory board of ADA, and PAAC, and is a former board member of APSARD. In his groundbreaking book, Permission to Proceed, The Keys to Creating a Life of Passion, Purpose, and Possibility for Adults with ADHD, David shares his unique and effective coaching models for gaining control of one's ADHD at home, work, and in the community. David is an inductee of the International CHAD Hall of Fame and a recipient of the Founders Award from ACO for his many contributions in the field of ADHD coaching and research. David is also one of the authors of the pioneering research are their character strengths associated with ADHD. Prior to coaching, David helped direct the marketing and strategic planning on behalf of one of the world's largest advertising agency, Madison Avenue's Young and Rubicam. David is a graduate cum laude of Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Communications. He and his wife, Adka, no, not your wife, Adka, your wife, Marla David, who is Adka's co-founder, have 2 adult children and an adorable granddaughter. And in his previous life, David played Division I college basketball and earned a black belt in Budokai Karate, so don't mess with him. So I'd like to welcome you, David, and thank you for joining us today. And David is going to talk with us about a critical essential, the ADHD lens. So David, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. I'm very humbled by all of you inviting me to be part of this, I think, very important series of great presenters. I'm not including myself as a great presenter, but the future ones that will be coming up, because the essentials are crucial for the ADHD coaching process. And today, in about 30 minutes, which is a tall order because I could talk about this for 30 years, and in fact, it is a culmination of 30 years of work, because the ADHD lens came out of an experience in my life, as it has for many of you coaches, when in 1993, 94, somewhere in that area, I was living in New York, and I left my job as an executive in the ad agency as a vice president working on the Miller Brewing account to go work with my dad, who is an entrepreneur with undiagnosed ADHD. And boy, what a pleasure that was to work with a guy who's got undiagnosed ADHD, and I was just finding out about mine. But what it taught me is to understand all the things that I didn't understand for the prior 38 years of my life. That having ADHD and having a lens with it doesn't mean that all those years of struggling with ADHD is a bad experience. In fact, context that gives you the experience to know the difference between dark and light. If you don't know what it's like to struggle, you don't know what it's like to feel good and celebrate. And so all these arenas, this paradox of ADHD, how could I catch a baseball coming at me at 8 miles an hour, but I couldn't pay attention to my math teacher? How could I do some athletic things that people found very difficult to do, but I couldn't put a sentence together when I had to write a paper? And these things embellished my life for a long time. I didn't understand why these things were occurring until I began a journey to discover my own ADHD. And that is when, at the same time I was working for my dad, I read an advertisement in Newsweek magazine about life coaching. Thomas Leonard, who started Coach University. And I called him up and he said, sure, come on in. And as I was training to be a life coach, I found out about my ADHD. Now, I believe this was synchronistic because having an understanding of life coaching gives you a template to understand there's a huge difference between life coaching and ADHD coaching. And in fact, the difference is the ADHD lens. And that's what we're going to talk about, because all of you on here, I'm presuming, my colleagues, my friends, my buds, future to be coaches, are here to learn about things you already know, but to put it in a platform that helps others understand what makes an ADHD coach different, what makes their training different, what makes their presence different, what makes their skills different. And without the ADHD lens, it's almost impossible to differentiate. So today, when I'm talking about the ADHD lens, it comes out of 2 arenas. One, my own professional experience and the clients I dealt with, and the other is neuroscience. One of the things that makes us so powerful and so strong as a profession is we have neuroscience to back a lot of the things that we do. A lot of the skills that we use in ADHD coaching, and certainly the training that we do, is based on strong neuroscience. And recently, I'd say in the last decade, our very strong connection with positive psychology, with Ryan Neiman over at the VIA Institute on Character. Okay, so that's the context that through my experience and the experience of my clients and the experience of the people I trained, I'm going to give you my perspective of the ADHD lens, but it's a perspective that integrates the PAAC Essentials. Okay, so with that said, let's go on to the next slide, Tori. Today we're going to learn the first objective for, let's identify what are the key components and what's the purpose of actually integrating the ADHD lens. And then what is the impact? What would happen if we didn't have a lens? What if just the PAAC Essentials were, safety, collaboration, wonder, and action without the lens? What kind of process would we have? What is that impact? And how does it fit into the purpose? And lastly, if we do have time, I have been, on the last few years, I've been working on a new metaphor that if we have time to share, if not, you'll have to ask me to come back and do it. That was just beautiful the way I strategized that. You got to have me back one way or the other. Okay, so let's move on. When we're talking about the lens, the skills that we learn, the things that we ask our clients to do, the things we observe, the things we reflect, the things we pose questions on are a very set of specialty skills that life coaching can't teach. And what we do is we invite and ask our clients permission to, first of all, educate them about ADHD. I recently gave a training, and one of the coaching students said, Dave, I'm so afraid to educate because that's directing the client. No, it's not directing the client. When you hear the client, you ask the question, what do you know about your ADHD? And they tell you very little. And then you go on to listen and they say, I'm sorry, I'm wondering, might I have permission to educate you about the way you're communicating with me? And then you begin to educate them what it means to be a verbal processor, what it means to, verbally process. And you start modeling for them succinct, concise language. Okay. And after we educate them, we then go, next bullet point, Tori, we ask them to embrace their neurodiverse brains. Now, the word neurodiversity is a word I think that sometimes can create confusion because it's a big umbrella of many co-occurring conditions. And so when I say neurodiverse, I'm referring to ADHD, yes, and all the co-occurring conditions, but it's very difficult to embrace your own brain wiring when you don't know what the trillions of options in your brain are doing, and you've been told that you're not doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And so that when we educate our clients about ADHD and they begin to realize, oh my goodness, I didn't know when I'm bored, my brain shuts down. I didn't know if I'm not engaged, my brain shuts down. I didn't know, and the list goes on. I didn't know. They cannot embrace their own unique brain wiring if they don't understand how their ADHD manifests in life. So after we embrace and educate, the third thing we do is we invite them to explore. Now that we understand what activates your brain, now that we understand that you're a verbal kinesthetic learner, now that we know you need to see pictures, now that we know that you need to move around, might we explore some different structures and systems to activate your brain in a unique way that you've never done before? And that we begin to explore systems and structures using success and strengths that they didn't even know existed because they've been buried. And so after we do these, you notice I like alliteration. Those of you who know me, I like those alliterations. Another way of remembering things, but then we energize them. And one of the great ways we energize our clients, and you all know this, is even when we identify something that they do well, even when we give them the evidence of the strengths that they possess, we have to be vigilant about it because they don't believe it, because the brain's not wired that way. Their dominant patterns for so long have been what they can't do at the expense of what they can do. So when we help them find what they can do and anchor it for them and remind them about it, these strengths can become one of the many sources of positive emotions. We, as people with ADHD, when we were uneducated and did not understand how our ADHD manifested, it was impossible for us to activate our brain because the dominant patterns of thinking and emotion that we created started with the negativity bias, that dominant pattern of I'm broken, there's something wrong, I'm not doing it the way everyone else does. But when you're educated about your ADHD and you embrace the unique way you do things, and you're invited at a coaching collaboration and partnership to begin to explore how would your system work if you integrated your strengths, and those strengths were sources of positive emotion that you could access whenever you want, then they begin to activate it. And lastly, we empower them. We empower them. It's not just about motivation. You know, ADHD is a challenge of motivation, but once they understand the sources of motivation, we no longer have to be there to empower them because they can do it by themselves. They know what ADHD is now. They don't believe it. They know it in their bones. They embrace the experience of how it works well at the expense of what doesn't, and they begin to expand their mindset by exploring things they've never explored before because they're just finding out about how their unique brain wiring works. And so after you do these things, next bullet point, please. The purpose of all of this, to educate, to embrace, explore, energize, and empower, is to provide an ongoing collaborative partnership. How is it collaborative? Well, when you've got a person on the other side of the phone, the video, in person, that understands how your brain works for the first time in your life, you've now created a very safe place for them to increase their self-awareness, pause and pay attention to what they're paying attention to, and identify, is that the best use of their attention? The ability to pause and self-regulate their emotions, and then the ability to self-initiate, take action. And so the ADHD lens is the foundation for all of that. Without these things, the coaching process cannot be nearly as effective as with the understanding of the ADHD lens. Next slide, please, Tori. So here's the ADHD lens, and this is how it's defined by PAAC. With the ADHD lens, it's a deep understanding of all the ADHD traits. How does inattention show up positively and negatively? Okay, inattention, believe it or not, can be a strength in the right situation. What are the patterns of dominant thinking that they have? If it's negative, we have to challenge that negative story and help them begin to understand that the way they thought they were broken, neuroscience doesn't agree. And not only does neuroscience not agree, but we are proactively challenging the negative story and beginning to understand how their unique brain wiring works. So we partner with the client to discover their unique workings of their brain, how their brains work, and then begin to employ it, begin to integrate it as fast as we can. Okay, so next. The ADHD lens is about gaining clarity. It's about, can I succeed with this brain wiring I was born with? Can I succeed with the genetics that I got from my mom, my dad, my uncle, whoever, and begin to express it in my unique way with my unique strengths? And the answer is, of course, yes. But when you don't understand the patterns that you've created, those patterns, what you pay attention to grows. Those patterns of repeating the same negative stories over and over create negative chemicals, which make it almost impossible to activate your brain. The ADHD lens, first and foremost, is about getting momentum. It's about activating your brain, and it's about giving you fuel for your gas tank to get out of the garage. Because if you don't have that fuel, you're going to be stuck in there all day. Next, please. So the first part of this is self-awareness. And when we go through the PAAC Essentials, you'll see those 5 E's again, because they all apply: education, empowering, embracing. They all apply to the PAAC Essentials. But the ADHD lens, first and foremost, as part of the process, has to create self-awareness for the client having a unique brain wiring and how it manifests. And how it manifests is a concept called situational variability. Nora Volkow in 2009 did a 9-year study where she conclusively revealed that people with ADHD need to be engaged in the activities, the topics, whatever it is in front of them, where their brains just cannot function. In fact, 10 years before we created a model at ADCA using interest, and I was laughed upon, that same model, in it, she said the following, basically, she said, interest is so important that it needs to be part of the symptomology of ADHD and integrated in the nomenclature of ADHD, and it hasn't been. We know it, but it hasn't been. And so how can you have success if you don't know the simplest, most foundational piece of the ability to activate your brain is you need to pause and pay attention to things that engage you and activate you. And she went on to say, this is the problem with our entire school system. Teachers don't engage. It's the problem with the workforce. The employers don't engage. They put people in professions and areas that don't work to the stimulation of their brain. That's dopamine. And so we have to find their success, we have to find their strengths, and create systems about gaining momentum and activating the brain. One of the things that I always struggled with as a kid growing up is I always had this philosophy, I have to start off with the things that I do the worst, so I can get to do the things that I like best. And I always struggled, and I didn't know why. I had to reverse that. And so situational variability is crucial in understanding. And here's what we've learned in those years about the lens. Interest is not enough. Interest only opens up the door to activation. Importance, there are levels. Importance is the next level. If it's interesting and important to me, I'm going to sustain my focus a lot longer. But ADHD lens is about sustaining focus. And the third and fourth level of interest are the two most important, and that's inspiration and imagination. I will take any person with ADHD anywhere in the world, and if I can help them find their inspiration, you will see no executive function deficits. In fact, you will see hyperfocus, and the challenge will be having them shift out of it. That's a whole other issue. But the fact of the matter is they're very capable when they find things that inspire them and activate their brain. Next. The negativity bias is pervasive for all human beings. However, research clearly shows us it is much more intense and exacerbated with ADHD, which leads to rumination. And when you listen to the language of your client's mind, which is all you have sometimes, you will hear them use this language, and you have to begin to challenge it using the ADHD lens. One of the ways we create safety is, what would it be like for you to put that anxiety to the side for 5 minutes? What would your life be like without that stress and anxiety? It's the part called wonder. It's a part called possibilities. But we also listen to the language and say things like, I hear you want this desired outcome, but your language, your tone, your emotions are not in harmony with that. What's that all about? We have to challenge the negativity bias. And this is one of the reasons that as soon as we can, the moment we hear anything positive, I'm going to really emphasize this with all of you, because you know, in most client conversations, especially in the beginning, 80 to 90% of their language is going to be negative. The moment you hear something positive, you have to be all over it. And you have to be anchoring it by saying, wow, that's really interesting. I'd love to know more about what you did. Watch the emotions change. Next, please. The power of the pause. You know, I've been teaching these concepts for a long time, and the one that stays with most people is the power of the pause. The ability to challenge a negative story, because the power of the pause is the beginning of emotional intelligence. It's the beginning of feeling something in your body and identifying it, and beginning to identify it and taking huge, deep breaths of oxygen, because if you don't, you get more stressed out, and your ability to access the parts of the brain that can identify the emotion are not available. That's called the prefrontal cortex. And the power of the pause is a skill that every person in the world can understand and can be taught. It's a discipline. In fact, research says that only 1/3 of the world has this ability. to pause and pay attention to the emotion that they're feeling in the moment. How can you challenge a negative story if you don't learn that? But we teach our clients that. We teach them that they need to challenge that story and ask how it's serving them, because if they don't, it's going to immobilize them. Okay, the next area is self-initiative. Now you've got self-awareness. You're pausing, you're paying attention to what you're paying attention to. You're starting to, hopefully, in the coaching process, begin to embrace your strengths and your uniqueness and even have a picture of what's possible. But what prevents this from happening is the human brain is a decision maker. All human beings make decisions based on what's stored in their memory. All. The problem is, you know what the next part is, the problem with people with ADHD is their dominant memories are negative. How can they move forward when they go for a context to make a decision? Two things happen with ADHD clients in my experience. One is the dominant memory is only negative, or there is no memory at all. I had no memory of how long it took me to do things when I was 38. How could I possibly be on time? My clients, same thing. They didn't know how long it took them to write an email. They didn't know how long it took them to get dressed. They didn't know how long it took them to do anything. So how could they be on time? You can't plan. So for 2 years of my life, and I've had clients do the same thing, I had to pause and create memory of how long it took me to do things. And after 2 years, I wasn't late anymore, or it was a lot less late, let's put it that way. But what we are doing is we are inviting clients to access the positive memory that is buried inside of them, because everybody has it. Next. And that means activating positive emotions. I gave a keynote at the University of Alabama around this topic, and there were about 500 or 600 people there. And at the time, the lovely Chris Dendy, who passed this year, invited me to go, and she introduced me. And I started off the session by asking the following. When was the last time any of you were asked to identify your sources of positive emotion? Dead silence. I asked it 3 times. Nobody raised their hand. And I said, and you know what, guys? I want you to think about it. That is the most important question anyone will ever ask you. Because if you don't know the source of positive emotion that activates your heart and your head, try having any success or fulfillment in your life. And boy, you could have dropped a dime, but this is the reality we live in. It's not just ADHD, it's the whole world. It's just more exacerbated with ADHD. Next. And so here's what I'm going to tell you part of the ADHD Lens is about. Find ways to take the pressure off your client. Find ways, if you hear that pressure, help them get over it. Help them say, you know, I hear that anxiety is so strong for you and it's immobilizing you. What if we just put that to the side for 5 minutes and come back to it later? What would that be like? Take the pressure off. When they beat themselves up, you can reverse that by saying, wait a minute, you shared this lovely story with me. Have you forgotten about it? You become their executive function and memory of all the positive things that they tend to forget. Because pressure won't move them forward, it's purpose. A lot of you are here because you understand what that pressure was like and you learned how to deal with it. Now your purpose is to help them overcome the pressure. And in coaching with the ADHD Lens, we don't stay stuck in problems. We're always about, I wonder what if you could do this? What if you could use your strengths? What if you could use your positive memories and emotions to activate your brain? What if you could express your character strengths, which are based in positive emotions and make people come alive? These are the things that ADHD coaches need to focus on. Next. And one thing that we don't spend enough time with is helping our clients identify how they process information. Some of you on this call right now need to move around to pay attention to me. I'm not upset by that. I'm not concerned if you're getting bored, if you need to move around, or some of you need to draw, or some of you need to verbalize something to someone else on a phone line. But the point of it is for you to be able to pay attention and sustain focus with me right now requires the understanding of how your unique brain wirings in all learning situations, and it changes. And even with all the positive memory and all the positive strengths, if you don't understand how you express yourself optimally, it can be a challenge. And ADHD coaches work with their clients to ask things like, from a place of strength, not from a place of weakness, what was it that you did in that successful moment to pay attention and to sustain focus? Because it's about sustaining focus. And what did you have to do to link the information so that you anchored it in your brain? And what did you have to do to remember it? We ask those questions, we'll get answers, but we tend not to. In the life coaching world, look at all these things we do and compare it to life coaching. I think you're getting an understanding, a beginning, that what we do is so different than life coaches. How could a life coach ever move a client forward without understanding these things? And this is just the tip of it, okay? I know you guys know this, but I'm giving you a practical way of thinking about this because we definitely do it differently. Next. Self-regulation. Now, next bullet, please. I think this is really important because you notice I got the power of the pause here in 2 places. Power of the pause is in everything. The ability to put on the brakes of our mind in every situation and identify what's going on is critical. And I find it very interesting, those of you who use the VIA character strengths, which really are a fantastic tool to identify the essence of what makes a human being tick. Probably most all of you, self-regulation will fall number 24. Number 24. And social intelligence, that's a different thing, but perseverance and self-regulation may fall. But here's the thing. When you use the power of the pause to identify the signature strengths, the things that make you tick, let's say it's love and kindness and creativity. The moment you pause to activate those, you have to use your self-regulation to pause and access them. And the reason for that is because those signature strengths are based in positive emotion. They open up the brain and they bring number 24 self-regulation right to the top. I can't wait to do research on that, baby, because in therapy, they would call that an intervention. And it's very successful. And I happen to know, and my friend Roger DeWitt, who's got his master's in positive psychology, love that man, and teaches with us at ADCA and is a coach. We've talked about this a lot. He's seen it. I've seen it. In fact, many of the leaders and teachers at ADCA have seen it too. We know that when you access positive emotion, your emotional intelligence improves, your energy improves, and you're able to activate. Very important to have the ADHD lens. I encourage all of you to go to the viacharacterstrengths.org and start using it. Next, please. So one of the things that we notice with the ADHD lens is our clients have patterns that they react to. These are hardwired in the brain because they've been repeated over many, many years. And without the self-regulation, without the ability to pause, they won't be able to respond objectively, rationally, without the emotions getting in the way. And so here I'm talking mostly about emotional self-regulation, but it's not the only thing. But emotions are a foundational element of ADHD that we as coaches spend a lot of time helping our clients get vocabulary for, because most people have a very poor emotional vocabulary. And one of the ways that we help them expand that vocabulary is by helping them define experiences that relate to the emotion. For example, some of the character strengths are based in strong emotion, like love. Well, how do you explain love without an experience? And I use this example, and I'm not ashamed, I use it all the time. I explain love as a picture of my lips permanently attached to my granddaughter's cheeks. That's love. Very easy, but it's an experience. And we don't have these experiences accessible because they're buried. And the coaching process and the ADHD lens is about helping the clients excavate that buried treasure out of their deep subconscious and bring it up to the level of conscious so we can help them anchor it and become part of their vocabulary and self-regulation. Next. I don't have to say much about this. We know what boredom does. We know what interest does. We know that many people with ADHD, how can they have an intention if they're in situations that are not using the strengths that they possess and are asking to use parts of their brain that can't get activated? It's not going to work. So we have to help them find the things that intentionally, with a specific focus, help them, empower them to do more good in their own lives, to work better, to be happier. But these things cannot happen without the ADHD lens. And last, whoops, there's a message coming up on my screen. I don't know about you, I never was taught to breathe. I'm not talking about what we're doing now. I was never taught to breathe when I was anxious. I was never taught to breathe mindfully, not meditation, mindfully, where for a minute I close my eyes, I sit in a place, for me it's on a rocking chair. Who says you have to be stationary when you're doing meditation? That was a belief that I had to challenge. I breathe while I'm moving on a rocking chair. It's called moving mindfulness. I don't know if that's an actual word, but I know people that do it. And when I mindfully move and breathe, I am able to reduce my anxiety. I'm able to think. I'm able to be clear. When I exercise, it is one of the best antidotes for stress that I know of. And exercise is also a source of creativity for me. Can't tell you how many times I was dancing to a Motown tune where ideas came to me and I had to stop with sweat rolling down to write these things down. But I know that in certain situations, breathing, exercise, movement are essential for self-regulation. All right, now let's put this all together with the PAAC Essentials. So we've got this ADHD lens. We're bringing it all together now. And in the middle, educating, giving them a greater understanding of their own ADHD, not just ADHD, their own brand, because ADHD is situational. It's specific to the human being. Yes, we all struggle with inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, but the situations that they occur are different. And the way they're activated and the impact they had are different. So we are working with our clients to take the general knowledge of ADHD and begin to ask them, how does it show up for them? Okay, and this creates great awareness because the coaching process with the ADHD lens is one big automatic pause. The clients speak, we listen, we reflect, we ask a great open-ended question, and there's silence. We allow the silence to go so that they can give us a response, and we don't put pressure on them. In fact, this may be one of the few places where they're able to process the myriad of thoughts running around in their heads. Next, please. And one more. So how do we create safety if the person in front of us doesn't think that we understand how their brain works? How do we create safety if we're just one of these other people in their lives that can't help them overcome all the things in their life that impair them, and begin to help them understand that they're not broken, to help them understand that they possess a unique brain wiring, that in that beautiful brain of theirs are trillions of options for processing. And just because the school and the workplace says do it 2 or 3 ways, and they can't do it that way based on their standards, does not mean they're broken. It just means those organizations and institutions are ignorant. They don't understand neurodiversity and specifically the brain wiring of ADHD. But we begin from day one to let them know there is nothing wrong with you. If you do, I have it, or I have a child with it, or a spouse with it, and they're not broken. They only thought they were broken because that's what the world told them, because the world doesn't get it. But now we're going to help you get it so you can move on and you can do your own brand. So safety and trust and intimacy is created with an ADHD coach that listens for the gaps in the knowledge of the ADHD client and begins and asks for permission to begin to share. Well, that's what you think, but that's not really what's going on. May I share with you? And you begin to give them the neuroscientific research. and you begin to, if you ask, may I share a personal story in my life that's related to this, or of my clients who all struggle with this but no longer struggle with it. You give them hope with evidence. Next, please. And so collaboration, you begin to explore what works. When I had my first ADHD coach years ago, and I don't even know if you can call her an ADHD coach because it wasn't defined, but she was the closest thing to it. And then, of course, Barbara Luther and I ended up coaching each other. Now, there's a real ADHD coach, if I ever saw one. And one of the things we began to do is, Barbara's a very slow processor, and I'm a very fast processor. And Barbara actually had a belief system when we were collaborating to come up with content and strategies. She actually thought I was brilliant because I came up with these ideas so fast. And then I said to her, are you crazy? I don't even know if this idea is good until I process it with you. And then we realized that the perfect combination for collaboration was a fast processor with a slow processor. Because she could slow me down. She says, what do you mean by that? She was coaching me. What do you mean by that? Where does that show up? How do you know that will work? What do you really want to say here? And we collaborated. And that's where the content that I had created on my own without Barbara began to synthesize, because she slowed me down. She became my articulate pause button. She helped me articulate by helping me pause. And this is what we do with our clients, but we do more. What would happen if you use your more visuals in your life? Since you're a verbal processor, what if you use voice activated software? And when your ideas came to you, just got on there and processed all those ideas and see what came up. That was a miracle for my clients. When all those ideas that they had in their head started showing up on the screen, they were blown away. They actually called me up and say, Dave, these aren't my ideas. I said, where did they come from? Well, they couldn't believe it came out of their brain, but it did. Next. Wonder. I think this is wonderful. Let's thank Jay for this one. Jay Perry, he really, he taught me a lot about wonder, although we did a different version of it. Jay had a wonderful way of talking about wonder. And really what I understand wonder to be, I just wonder what life could be like for you if. What if? Those words are so powerful that, let me tell you how powerful what if. I've had clients in the midst of anxiety and stress tell me about their anxiety. And I said things like, what if that anxiety was no longer there? And the client began to cry and say, nobody's ever asked me that. Well, I am, and I'm here to give you permission to proceed. They thought they couldn't do that. They thought they had to fix the anxiety before they gave themselves permission to bypass it. And they're not the only ones. This is a strong ADHD lens. But when we ask what if, what could your life be like? And we say, I'm the only one here. Give it a shot. I think you'll really be amazed at what comes out of it. And they begin to do that, quality of life begins to change dramatically. They realize for the first time in this wonder that they have the ability to create an image that they can act on when they choose to. They don't have to act on it right away, and they don't have to be overwhelmed about it. We can break it down piece by piece. And then last is action. ACTION, that big word. And you all know this is one of the hardest pieces in the coaching process, to get our clients to access the strengths, the energy, the executive function that they need to take action on something that's really important to them. And my experience with the ADHD lens is this is truly about memory. This is truly about accessing successful knowings or experience that they can use as a context, so that the moment we find something they've done well, and we use that as a context, how come you did it here and you're afraid to do it here? And what were you doing here that you're not doing here? They begin to realize if they've done it in the past, they can do it in the present, and they can do it even better. But because they've never accessed that context, and because their dominant program for so long has been, I can't, I won't, I never could, they're afraid to take action. That fear is so great. We take the fear away by helping them excavate together in partnership these memories, these magnificent moments of fulfillment, of joy, whatever they might be. And it doesn't even have to be the same arena. It just has to be an arena where they see that they've done something well as a starting point, and it begins to change their ability to take action. They're no longer afraid because they're not perfectionistic. They're not worried about the perfect result, because when I ask them, please describe the perfect result to me, they can't give me a definition. There is no perfect. There are only action and results, and the results are revised. And if you have a picture in your mind, you keep acting and revising until you get the picture, one piece of action at one time and space. And so we're not going to have time for the metaphor, but I'm perfectly timed for questions. And here's what I'd like you to think about. A lot of these things are invisible. They become more visible through the partnership and the collaboration of coach and client together. You have, in my opinion, those of you who have chosen to be in this field have chosen the most beautiful calling. I can't call it a profession, a calling that any arena of any domain in the world has created. You have the ability to empower people who sat in darkness for so long and invite them to see the light, because you can. And so this is one perspective of the ADHD lens. But you see, when somebody asks you what's the difference between ADHD coaching and life coaching, you can see there's a huge difference, okay? And we have the evidence and the success to prove it.
David, that was amazing. Thank you so very much. I think
My
that we
pleasure.
really understand now how critical the ADHD lens is and how that differentiates us from every other coaching profession. Which I'm going to encourage people to write questions in the chat. But I want to ask you one question before
Sure.
we answer those questions. And that is this. We know that ICF does not have any specialties in coaching, whether you're executive coach, life coach, everything. But PAAC is the only organization that credentials ADHD coaches. So what is the value of PAAC, and why is PAAC so important for ADHD coaches and our ADHD clients?
Oh my goodness. You want me to talk for another hour?
Good.
To put it as succinctly as I can, for years, all we had was the ICF. I believe we were the first, I'm almost positive, we were the first ADHD coach training program to be accredited by ICF. However, we had life coaching competencies, and we had to take the life coaching competencies of ICF and integrate them with the knowledge of the ADHD lens. And there was no specific language or process specifically defined. We had our own process at the Academy, but what PAAC helped us do is build a powerful structure with language, just like ICF has, for our profession that distinguishes us from all other professions. That's number one, that we didn't have the language, we didn't have the process. We had a process, but it was not nearly as defined as PAAC is, and that helped us train our coaches better and make better coaches. That's one piece. The other piece is this: without PAAC, ADHD coaches that only went to ICF didn't have a way of distinguishing their skills by being evaluated with a specific set of skills by an accrediting body. Okay, so when ICF says, here's your PCC, your MCC, your ACC, you are tested on just their coaching competencies, and you demonstrate your ability to conduct the coaching process with a client. But that's life coaching. And so there was no credential or certification that distinguished a life coach from an ADHD coach, literally. And so this is the first and only organization in the world that has not only the language and essentials to distinguish us, but you have to give the evidence of your ability to do it and get your credential. And when you get that credential, and I'm telling you, this is going to become more and more important, people are beginning to ask, are you certified? But what they're not asking, are you certified with an accredited organization? So you can get certified anywhere. And what PAAC allowed us to do is have an accrediting organization, which gave us the highest level of training and credentialing available. There is no higher. So in therapy, you have licensing. We don't have licensing, but this is the highest form of credential that you can get from an accredited institution. And without PAAC, we would not have that ADHD that distinguishing credential that separates us from everyone else. So it's essential, it's critical. That's why Barbara and I worked with Catherine and the whole group tirelessly, because if we didn't have this organization. And there were tough moments. This group that serves you guys now is an amazing group who's dealt with tremendous adversity to create an amazing organization with amazing tools that I'm very proud of. And to not, as an ADHD coach, to not be part of PAAC, I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice. That's the third piece, is unbelievable network of people that will support you in any way they can, with clients, with advice, with counseling. It's a family. It's a family. And I don't know anywhere else in the world that this organization exists. And so the fact that they're vibrant and alive means you really ought to check them out and get certified with them at any level, because it will help your practice. There's no question about it.
Well, thank you very much. I think, and one of the things is we do have two accredited schools, and they are ADCA and Mentor Coach, but we are not affiliated specifically with any particular school, even though those two schools are accredited by us and we have vetted them and feel confident about their curriculum. But we will credential coaches from all schools. You have to prove your training, your ability, your understanding of the ADHD lens. So thank you very much for that shout out to PAAC, because we welcome all of you ADHD coaches, and we do hope you will check us out. Thank you, David. Well, I think we have a few minutes to ask some questions, and Deirdre, our marketing co-chair, has been combing the chat, and she's going to give us some questions, please. Deirdre, go ahead.
Okay, and thank you for those of you who did submit questions, and we're just going to do our best here. One question that I think is very valuable is when a coach has a client that has comorbidity with depression, perhaps untreated comorbidity with depression, perhaps untreated or maybe even diagnosed, how would the ADHD coaching approach change, if at all?
Well, first of all, as you all know, we don't make any diagnoses. Okay, so if the person tells us they're depressed and we see that their energy and their attention is not available during the coaching session, we're going to ask them about that and what we're going to say. Because if they're not available because the depression's untreated, or it's so intense that the emotion is overriding anything that they can hear, we're going to begin to ask, have you told your doctor? Have you told your therapist? And a lot of times the answer I get is no, they haven't. And so I say, I will be here for you, but my recommendation is we use this session to help you articulate what you'd like to say to the doctor. Tell me what you're struggling with. Tell me where it shows up, so that when you go to the doctor, and if you want me there and you feel you can't articulate it, I will be. And I've actually done this, Deirdre. I've gone with my clients to help the client articulate what they had a hard time articulating to the doctor, because they were more stressed with the doctor and they weren't with me, so they could be open and they could tell me exactly what was happening. And I will tell you, those sessions are as important as any coaching session, because it gets their brain on a stable condition, their ability to pay attention, sustain focus, because the medication they have isn't working, or there's a belief system they need to work with a therapist, whatever it is. But it does not fall into the realm of coaching, because it's not a won't, it's I can't move on. When I hear the word I can't, I'm stuck, that's out of the realm of coaching. So I asked them, let's communicate to those people that are supporting you with your medications and your therapy.
Great.
And
Deirdre.
just a little follow-up question to that. If you're not in the position to go to the therapist with your client, would it be beneficial to work with your client on maybe creating a script of questions to work with that therapist?
Sure, sure. But today with virtual, it's so easy. You know, it's not been a
True.
problem. When virtual wasn't here, yeah, I couldn't drive 2 hours to be with my client. But now it's so easy. It's never been a problem. And even with the script, well, we do work on a script, but the script is to help them deal with the sadness while they're getting treated. You know, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be as effective, but it helps them. It helps them to shift the thinking.
We have another question here about, could you elaborate on self-regulation and responding versus reacting?
Deirdre, I only heard a piece of that. Could you repeat that one more time, please?
My apologies. The question is, can you elaborate more on self-regulation and responding versus reacting?
Okay, great. I'm glad somebody was paying attention. I love that. Okay, so when we get our clients before they understand their ADHD, a lot of them, and let's use the family as an example. Let's use the family because they can piss us off faster than anybody else. That's why I say that. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way. It's just they know us well and they can trigger us. And let's say you have a pattern of anytime your mother or father looks at you a certain way or says a certain word, you react and anger and frustration come out and you're screaming at the top of your lungs. That is reaction. And that pattern has been repeated over many, many years since you were a young kid. When mom and dad would say something to you and you would just react. That pattern is hardwired in your brain. That's reacting. When we are coaching and the client says, you know, whenever I go see my parents, they look at me in a certain way and they say a certain word, I react and I go off. And so we begin to ask them, how does that feel when you do that? It feels terrible. I feel rotten. I go back and apologize. And how would it feel if you could respond in a different way? And I explain what response means. What if you could not do it spontaneously? Responding means you need a little planning, a little practice. You don't go into a situation with your parents spontaneously, knowing that knowing that they can trigger you because you're not prepared. Your dominant pattern that you've repeated over and over again is automatically going to be triggered. But when you pause and think about, well, I'm going to see my mom and my dad. I can't control their response, but I can control mine. How would I like to respond to them in a way that lets them know I don't like what they're saying, but I don't get angry? And so we begin to coach, and some of the things we do is, oh, I see that love and kindness are two of your character strengths. How would you like to express your response in a loving, kind way? After all, you do love your parents, and we bring that into it. That might be one way. Let's just say as an example, and they say, yes, I would like to be loving and kind to my parents, but they piss me off, and they blah, blah, blah. And I said, see, there it is. What can you do before you get in there to know that that's what they're going to do and be ready for it? And we practice it. We practice it. They tell me exactly what their parents would say. I become the parents, and we practice it until they can go in there. And instead of reacting with the same pattern that they're unprepared for, they react with a pattern, and they may be clenching their teeth, but they're not angry and they're building up. And in fact, I can't tell you how many relationships have been dramatically improved between husband and wife in situations that they did spontaneously without any thought or practice because they never paused to pay attention to it. So response means I pause, I pay attention to it, and I identify what message that I have control over in my best personality or message that I want to convey. What message can I express to that person by practicing it, by being ready for it? And believe it or not, you get pretty good. When you get pretty good in one area of your life, it seems to expand in all areas because it's practice, it's discipline. It's not an innate skill. It's practice, practice, practice. I hope that answered the person's question.
David, that's great. We're coming toward the end of our time, and I just if you can stay a minute longer, but I do want to say just a couple of things for those of you who have to leave. First off, the opening word was essentials, and the closing word is ADHD Lens. ADHD Lens. So Deirdre has put that in the chat, and we would like you to send us those opening and closing words within the next 24 hours to info@paaccoaches.org, which is also in there. I want to, before everybody leaves, I want to say thank you very, very much to David for his time
My
and your
pleasure.
wisdom and your endless support of PAAC. God bless you, sir. Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank our support team, Tori Throckmorton, Maggie Rowe, Meredith Nauer, and marketing co-chair Deirdre Donchian, who made all this possible. I want to thank all of you attendees. We have people from Germany, England, Canada, Belgium, Australia, Vietnam, and the United States. And that's not everybody. That's just who I just caught off the things. So we are working to see if we can make this recording available of this presentation. So watch your email, and we will let you know how it will be available through our website. And our website, and maybe, and Sweden too, Marie says. Oh, and Ireland. And so could you put our website up, Deirdre, which is www.paaccoaches.org. All right. I just want to thank everybody. And if you have to leave, bye-bye. Thank you. And David, did you have time to answer one more question or so?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, David, Deirdre, go for it.
I wish I had more questions. If I go back, there was a question about toxic positivity. And I'm so sorry. It's going to take me a moment to do that.
It was this. I think I've got it. It's what do we do about clients who warn us not to use toxic positivity?
Well, I'm assuming toxic positivity means that it's a bias of always using positive, looking at everything positive, even when things are negative, and not being rational about it. And so positivity needs to be balanced. You know, even when you're using character strengths, you can overuse kindness and love. You know, if everybody that you talk to, you consider kind, and you give them money and think you're going to get paid back, that's toxic. And, you know, you're giving your money away because you think everybody is good and is going to pay you back. So we always have to ask the client and make them aware, what is the best use of this strength right now? Because it's about pausing and thinking about, how do I utilize the strengths that I have in a balanced way that serves me well. And so toxic positivity can mean, you know, for example, workaholics. That's a form of toxic positivity. They're getting all these neurochemicals from their success, and they say things like, oh, I don't have to go home. I'm providing for the family. I'm doing everything I can. Meanwhile, the kids are missing them. Their wives are missing them. And this toxic positivity, look how successful I am, and I'm providing for my family. I can do what I want, and I can continue to have these dopamine neurochemicals make me feel good. So we always have to challenge even the positive. We have to be in a balanced way.
That is great thoughts, David. Well, we've come to our time, and I want to say thank you again to all of you who joined us today. Remember that our next session is May 17th with the fabulous Barbara Luther, who will talk to you about safety, a critical element for all coaching relationships. But for today, thank you again, David Giwerc.
My pleasure.
You're an ADHD coach rock star, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I love being here.
Oh, thank you for coming and giving us your time. Everybody, thank you. Have a great day. And wait a sec. We've got one more raised hand here. Heidi Healy. There's a raised. Can we do anything about that, Tori? I don't know if we can.
There's a question out how to register for the remaining 4 sessions. We're going to do the same process as we did the last time, which is we're going to post it on our membership list. We're going to post it with ADCO and ACO, and it will be a sign up through Eventbrite.
Eventbrite. Okay, those were the questions. Well, thank you again, everybody. I'm going to say good afternoon and wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.